After what felt like an emotional ice age, Bridgerton Season 4 has finally returned, and this time the chaos centers around Benedict Bridgerton, a man who met one woman once, at one party, and decided to dedicate his entire existence to finding her. The season follows Netflix's favorite tradition of splitting the story in half, and part 1 ends on a cliffhanger so loud it practically slammed the door in our faces. Between new neighbors popping up, long simmering secrets threatening to spill, and Benedict once again proving he is allergic to emotional growth, these first 4 episodes wasted absolutely no time delivering drama. As the show itself loves to remind us, everyone drinks tea, and this batch was scalding. Right from the start, the story leans heavily into Benedict's obsession with the mysterious lady in silver, who instantly enchanted him at the masquerade ball and then vanished into thin air. What he doesn't realize is that the woman he's been desperately searching for is Sophie, someone who couldn't be further from the world he lives in. Sophie's life is a masterclass in unfairness. Born into nobility but stripped of it after her father's death, she's forced into servitude by Lady Penwood, who treats her less like family and more like a poorly kept secret. Sophie is constantly reminded that she belongs in the background, unseen and unheard, which makes her brief moment of freedom at the masquerade all the more heartbreaking. Benedict, meanwhile, starts the season insisting that love and marriage aren't for him. He wants freedom, creativity, and zero emotional responsibility. That plan collapses immediately the moment Sophie walks into the ballroom. From that point on, he's spiraling, interrogating society women, staring at miniature portraits like they're ancient artifacts, and analyzing lips as if he's conducting a criminal investigation. Despite all this effort, he finds nothing, while Sophie watches from the sidelines, fully aware that being discovered could destroy the small sense of stability she's finally gained working at the Bridgerton house. And honestly, after what she endured under the Penwood's roof, her reluctance makes perfect sense. Things come to a head in the final episode when Benedict is shown painting the lady in silver entirely from memory, leaving her face unfinished because he can't quite recall it. The symbolism is heavy, and when he rushes to the Bridgerton house, it feels like the moment where everything is about to click, except it doesn't. Instead of realizing the truth, Benedict asks Sophie to become his mistress, right after they've already crossed that line emotionally and physically. It's an offer that strips their connection of meaning, and Sophie does exactly what she should do. She refuses. The moment confirms that while Benedict may look like he's changed, deep down he's still choosing comfort over courage. With the Penwoods moving in next door and Sophie trying to stay invisible, it's clear that those carefully guarded secrets aren't going to stay buried for long. And as if that wasn't enough brewing tension, Francesca's storyline quietly sets up trouble of its own. Her realization that something is missing in her marriage to John Stirling feels subtle at first, but the way the season mirrors its opening and closing moments makes it clear that this is only the beginning of a much larger emotional shift, one that could lead somewhere unexpected in the second half. And before we go any further, if you're enjoying this breakdown, make sure you hit subscribe, because trust me, you're going to want to be here when everything finally explodes. John quietly mentions to Francesca that moving into the house with Michaela wasn't exactly the plan, and in that moment it becomes obvious that he's noticed something she's been trying very hard to hide. Francesca has been deliberately keeping her distance from Michaela, and while no one ever says the quiet part out loud, the tension is loud enough to hear from across the room. It doesn't feel like discomfort or awkwardness. It feels like restraint, like someone actively avoiding feelings they're not ready to deal with. The show has been carefully laying the groundwork all season by showing that Francesca isn't fully fulfilled in her marriage, and rather than spelling it out, it lets the dissatisfaction sit there and breathe. When Michaela unexpectedly appears at the very end of the 4th episode and casually tells Francesca that she looks like she's just seen a ghost, it feels less like a joke and more like a crack in the wall. If Francesca has been holding something back, this is the moment it starts leaking out. All signs point to this being more than a passing confusion, and it wouldn't be surprising if the story is steering them toward each other once the second half begins. Violet's storyline, on the other hand, feels grounded in something far more quietly emotional. She's reached a point in her life where the roles that once defined her have softened. Her children are grown, her husband is gone, and the world has kept moving whether she was ready or not. Wanting companionship again isn't a betrayal. It's human. Marcus enters her life at exactly the wrong and right time, forcing her to confront the guilt she's been carrying for still missing Edmund while also craving affection. Mrs. Wilson's reminder that life is meant to be lived, not endured, is what finally nudges her forward. There's also something incredibly honest about Violet's insecurity regarding her body and desirability after having children, and the show handles it with surprising warmth. The moment she looks at herself in the mirror isn't about vanity, it's about reclaiming confidence, and once she steps into that confidence, it's impossible not to feel it radiating off her. Of course, the fact that she and Marcus are keeping things discreet raises one very important question. If Lady Whistledown catches wind of this, will Violet Bridgerton become the scandal of the season? Eloise continues her personal mission of emotionally distancing herself from nearly everyone she loves, all while insisting she's perfectly fine doing it. She's made it very clear that marriage and romance aren't for her. But what's more striking is how openly dismissive she's become of the joy others find in those traditions. What starts as independence slowly edges into isolation, and the sharp words her sister throws back at her land harder than she expects. That moment feels like a turning point, one that forces Eloise to consider whether her rejection of society is truly empowering or just another way of pushing people away. It doesn't feel like the end of her story, it feels like the uncomfortable middle. And while love may not be anywhere near her right now, it's hard not to be curious about who could ever challenge her enough to break through that armor. Meanwhile, Queen Charlotte's storyline quietly grows darker with each episode. Lady Danbury expresses a desire to return home, hoping to finally step away from court life, only to find herself denied permission entirely. What's framed as loyalty slowly starts to feel like captivity. Charlotte's refusal to let her go isn't about power, it's about fear. The looming possibility of King George's death hangs heavy over everything, and Charlotte's desperation not to be left alone makes her cling tighter to the people closest to her. Knowing their history only makes it more painful to watch. Lady Danbury's attempt to secure Alice Mondrick as a new lady-in-waiting feels intentional, almost strategic, a way to ensure the queen is cared for by someone who will treat her as a person, not just a ruler. Alice doesn't want the role, but if she accepts it, that bond could become exactly what Charlotte needs. And finally, allow Lady Danbury to step away and reclaim a life beyond the palace walls. As for season 4, part 1 as a whole, it does exactly what it's meant to do. It sets emotional traps, plants quiet seeds of conflict, and ends just as everything is about to unravel. Some characters are evolving, some are resisting growth with impressive dedication, and others are standing on the edge of life-changing realizations they're not quite ready to face. It's slow in places, sharp in others, and packed with enough tension to make the wait for part 2 feel borderline rude. But if the second half delivers on what this setup promises, the payoff could be well worth it. Honestly, I thought these first 4 episodes were really strong overall, especially the opening stretch. Episodes 1 and 2 were easily my favorites, and did a great job pulling me straight back into the world. Episode 3 slowed things down a bit since it mostly stayed confined to the country house, but episode 4 knew exactly when to step on the gas, and picked things back up right when it needed to. One of my favorite moments of the entire part came at the end of episode 1 with the reveal that Sophie was actually a maid, because suddenly everything we'd already seen clicked into place. Her wide-eyed fascination with the chandelier, the instant fear when Lady Penwood appeared, and the way she seemed to treasure the smallest kindnesses all made complete sense once we watched her return to her real life. It retroactively made those earlier scenes hit so much harder. I genuinely love the idea of Benedict falling for someone like Sophie, even though she technically shouldn't be a maid at all. She's easily one of the kindest, most sincere characters the show has ever introduced, and it's impossible not to root for her. I really hope she gets the happiness she deserves. The quiet moments between her and Benedict worked especially well for me, like the simple hand-holding that mirrored the glove moment from episode 1, or that devastating shot where he walks up the stairs while she disappears down the hallway. Those visual parallels were subtle but emotionally brutal, and they sold their connection completely. I believe in their love, which is why it's so frustrating watching Sophie hold back the truth. At this point, it feels like she has almost nothing left to lose, and I just want her to finally tell him she was the lady in silver. Even though the central focus was clearly Benedict and Sophie, I appreciated that the show still gave enough time to the rest of the cast. Francesca and John Stirling's storyline felt properly developed rather than rushed. The ongoing tension among the maids had real bite to it, and Violet's arc was given room to breathe instead of being treated like background noise. And then there are the Penwoods. Honestly, how genuinely cruel can people be? Lady Penwood and Miss Rosamond were ice cold towards Sophie in a way that felt almost cartoonishly evil, and I'm fully expecting some long overdue consequences. I don't buy for a second that Sophie was truly written out of her father's will, and I'd love nothing more than to see the Penwoods lose their status, or better yet, see Lady Penwood face actual punishment. The fact that she's constantly dressed in black feels less like fashion and more like a warning label. So far, I'm really enjoying the season, and I think part 1 ends on a strong cliffhanger that does exactly what it's supposed to do. Thankfully, the wait for part 2 isn't too painful, which means all that's left to do now is speculate wildly and overanalyze every little detail until it returns. And with that, that's my breakdown of Bridgerton Season 4, Part 1. If you want more Bridgerton content, and I'll be covering Part 2 as soon as it drops, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Let me know what you thought of the first half of the season in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.